Life is a series of moments, some of which we expect, and others that blindside us when we least anticipate. Just when we think we have it all figured out, everything changes in an instant. In those rare, raw moments, we discover parts of ourselves we never knew existed, hidden fears, unspoken truths, and desires that had long been buried. A wedding, a celebration of love, should be the happiest day of one's life. But sometimes it's the very moment we choose to unveil the deepest secrets. When a bride unexpectedly abandons her groom at the altar, the shock waves ripple through not only the guests, but also the lives of everyone involved. The reason behind the bride's shocking decision is one that no one saw coming. This is not just about a woman walking away. It's about a life forever changed, a past that can no longer be ignored, and the painful, necessary confrontation with the truth. In moments like these, we're reminded that life's real stories aren't always the ones we plan, but the ones that force us to face what's hidden within. Samantha's heels echoed loudly as she stepped onto the marble floor of St. Benedict's Church. A hush fell over the gathered guests, and every eye followed her graceful movements. The air buzzed with excitement, her white gown glowing under the afternoon sun that streamed through the stained glass windows. James, her groom, stood at the altar with a smile that could light up the whole world. His eyes were locked on her, his heart racing with love and joy. This was supposed to be their perfect day. Everything was as it should be, or so it seemed. But just as Samantha reached the altar, she turned to James. Her face, previously serene, now trembled with emotion. A sudden wave of confusion spread through the crowd as Samantha took a deep breath, tears forming in her eyes. "I can't do this, James." Her voice quivered, but her words cut through the silence. Like thunder, gasps erupted from the pews, and James froze, his expression twisting from joy to shock. What are you saying?" James stammered, his voice barely audible. Samantha shook her head, stepping back from him. "I'm sorry, two have to go." And just like that, Samantha turned on her heel, her veil fluttering as she sprinted down the aisle, leaving James, the guests, and her parents all stunned. The ornate doors of the church slammed shut behind her, and the sound echoed in the hearts of everyone present. No one could understand what had just happened. Why had Samantha abandoned her groom at the altar? What could possibly have made her walk away from the love of her life? The morning had started off beautifully. Samantha woke up in her childhood bedroom, sunlight spilling through her lace curtains. Her bridesmaids bustled around, helping her with her makeup and ensuring her hair was perfect. Laughter filled the room as they reminisced about old memories, and Samantha felt a warm glow in her chest. Today was her wedding day, and she was marrying the man of her dreams. James had been her rock for the past 5 years. He was everything she had ever wanted, kind, funny, and unwaveringly loyal. Together, they had built a life full of love and shared dreams. Their wedding day was the culmination of everything they had worked towards, and Samantha had never been more certain of anything in her life, or so she thought. As the hours ticked by and the time for the ceremony drew nearer, Samantha began to feel a strange, unshakable unease. It started as a dull ache in her chest and grew into a weight that she couldn't ignore. Her best friend, Chloe, noticed her fidgeting with her engagement ring. "Nerves?" Chloe asked with a smile, adjusting Samantha's veil. "Yeah, maybe," Samantha replied, though her voice lacked conviction. By the time she stepped into the limousine that would take her to the church, her heart was pounding. She clutched the bouquet in her hand so tightly that her knuckles turned white. At the church, James stood at the altar, radiating joy and confidence. He exchanged smiles with his best man and glanced at the entrance, eager for Samantha's arrival. The guests chatted in hushed tones, their excitement palpable. But behind the scenes, Samantha was having a moment of doubt. She stood just outside the church doors, gripping Chloe's arm. "I don't know if I can do this," she whispered, her voice trembling. "What are you talking about?" Chloe's brows furrowed. "It's just nerves, Sam. You love James, remember? You're going to walk in there and marry the man of your dreams." Samantha nodded, but the unease lingered. She couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. Taking a deep breath, she straightened her shoulders and stepped through the doors. As the bridal march played, the unease was momentarily replaced by awe. The sight of James, standing there with love shining in his eyes, almost made her forget everything. But when she reached the altar, the weight in her chest returned with full force, and then, in front of everyone she loved, she made the most shocking decision of her life. The doors of St. Benedict's slammed shut behind Samantha, their heavy echo following her down the cobblestone path. She didn't stop running, even as her veil snagged on a branch and tore off. Her lungs burned, and her pristine white shoes were quickly stained by the muddy path. None of that mattered. All she could think about was getting away. In the distance, the faint sound of someone shouting her name reached her ears, but Samantha didn't dare look back. Tears blurred her vision, her chest heaving as she darted around the corner and into the narrow alley behind the church. Her heart pounded like a drumbeat in her ears, drowning out everything else. She leaned against the cold brick wall, trying to catch her breath. Her bouquet, forgotten, fell to the ground. The delicate flow was crushed beneath her feet. "Why, Samantha? Why did you do that?" she whispered to herself, clutching her chest as if trying to stop her heart from breaking apart. James remained rooted to the spot, staring at the empty aisle. His mind was racing, trying to comprehend what had just happened. The murmurs in the crowd grew louder, like a swarm of angry bees. "Is this some kind of joke?" one guest whispered to another. "Maybe she got cold feet," another suggested. James' best man, Daniel, placed a hand on his shoulder. "Mate, do you want me to go after her?" "No," James said quietly, his voice cracking. He shook his head and stepped down from the altar, his face pale. He turned to Samantha's parents, who were seated in the front row, their faces etched with confusion and embarrassment. "What's going on?" James demanded, his voice rising. "Did she say anything to you? Did you know this was going to happen?" Her mother shook her head, tears streaming down her face. "I don't understand. She was fine this morning. She was excited, James." Her father, however, looked troubled. He didn't say anything, but exchanged a quick, nervous glance with his wife. "Do you know something?" James pressed, noticing the silent exchange. "No," her father said firmly, but the hesitation in his voice betrayed him. Chloe burst through the side doors of the church, her heels clattering loudly as she ran in the direction Samantha had disappeared. She found her in the alley, slumped against the wall, her white gown stained with dirt and tears streaming down her face. "Sam," Chloe gasped, crouching beside her. "What are you doing here? Everyone's freaking out." Samantha looked up at her best friend, her face pale and her eyes red-rimmed. "I couldn't do it, Chloe. I couldn't marry him." "Why? What's going on? You've been with James for years. You love him." Samantha shook her head, her hands trembling. "I can't tell you. You wouldn't understand. Try me," Chloe shot back, grabbing her hands. "Whatever it is, it can't be worse than running out on your wedding in front of 200 people. For a moment, Samantha hesitated, as though debating whether to confide in Chloe. Then she took a deep breath and whispered, "There's something I've been hiding from James, from everyone." Chloe blinked. "What are you talking about?" "It's something I thought I could bury, something I thought didn't matter anymore," Samantha said, her voice breaking. "But today, standing there at the altar, I realized I couldn't start a life with him without him knowing the truth." Chloe stared at her, wide-eyed. "What truth?" Before Samantha could answer, the sound of approaching footsteps made them both freeze. The tension was thick enough to cut with a knife. James stood at the altar, gripping the edge tightly as he watched Daniel try to calm the increasingly restless crowd. Samantha's parents were speaking in hushed tones, their faces pale. "I'm going after her," James finally said, his voice steely. Daniel blocked his path. "Are you sure that's a good idea? She just ran out on you, mate." "I need answers," James snapped. "I deserve to know why." Without waiting for a reply, James stormed down the aisle, ignoring the whispers and stares. He pushed through the heavy doors, his jaw set with determination. Samantha and Chloe pressed themselves against the wall as James' voice echoed nearby. "Samantha, where are you?" Chloe turned to Samantha, her eyes wide. "He's looking for you. What are you going to do?" "I don't know," Samantha whispered, her voice barely audible. The sound of James' footsteps grew louder, and Samantha felt her heart leap into her throat. She wasn't ready to face him. Not yet. As James turned the corner and their eyes met, Samantha's breath hitched. "Sam," James said, his voice filled with a mix of hurt and anger. "Why? Why did you leave me standing there?" "Saman." Samantha swallowed hard, her hands twisting nervously in her lap. "James, before I met you, I wasn't the person you think I am. I wasn't," she trailed off, her voice breaking. "You weren't what?" James pressed, stepping closer. "I wasn't Samantha," she said finally, her voice barely above a whisper. Chloe gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. James blinked, the words not making sense at first. "What do you mean you weren't Samantha?" he asked, his tone filled with disbelief. "I wasn't Samantha," she repeated, tears streaming down her cheeks. "I used to be someone else. I changed my name, my identity, everything." James took a step back, his face pale. "Why? What are you saying? Who were you?" Samantha hesitated, her breath coming in short gasps. She glanced at Chloe, who gave her a small nod of encouragement. "My name wasn't Samantha Matthews," she confessed. "It was Lauren Cole. And I was involved in something terrible." James stared at her, stunned into silence. Samantha, or Lauren, as she was once called, grew up in a small town, miles away from where she now lived. Her childhood had been normal, even happy, until her late teens when she fell in with the wrong crowd. Desperate for adventure and blinded by infatuation with a charismatic boyfriend, she became involved in a string of reckless decisions that spiraled out of control. One night, a harmless prank turned into something far darker. A house party, too much alcohol, and a stolen car led to an accident that changed everything. The vehicle crashed into a family's van, leaving 2 people seriously injured. Lauren wasn't driving, but she had been there. She had lied to protect her boyfriend, and they had both fled the scene. The guilt had eaten away at her for years, even after she moved to a new town and legally changed her name. She thought she could start fresh, leaving Lauren Cole and her mistakes behind. And for a while, she succeeded. She built a new life, met James, and fell in love. But today, as she walked down the aisle, the weight of her past crashed over her like a tidal wave. How could she promise to love and honor James without revealing the truth about who she really was? James stared at her, his expression unreadable. "You changed your identity because of something that happened years ago." "I didn't know what else to do," Samantha said, her voice breaking. "I was scared, James. I was stupid and scared, and I thought running away was the only way to fix it." James ran a hand through his hair, pacing back and forth. "So what? You thought you'd just lie to me forever? Build a life with me on a foundation of lies?" "No," Samantha cried. "I wanted to tell you so many times, but I was afraid you'd hate me. And then the years passed, and it just got harder and harder. I thought I could leave that part of my life behind. And you thought dropping this on me today at the altar was the right time," James snapped, his voice rising. "I didn't plan it this way," Samantha sobbed. "It just hit me all at once. I couldn't go through with the wedding knowing I hadn't told you the truth." Before James could respond, Chloe's phone buzzed loudly, breaking the tension. She frowned, pulling it out of her bag. Her face went pale as she read the notification. "Chloe?" Samantha asked, noticing her friend's sudden change in expression. Chloe looked up, her eyes wide with alarm. "Sam, I think you need to see this." She held out her phone and Samantha's heart sank as she saw a news alert flashing on the screen. Fugitive Lauren Cole. Found, shocking revelation at Wedding Sparks investigation. Samantha's blood ran cold. Someone at the wedding must have recognized her or overheard her confession. James grabbed the phone and read the headline, his eyes narrowing. "Is this you?" he asked, his voice low and dangerous. Samantha couldn't speak. Her past had finally caught up with her, and now it wasn't just her relationship at stake, it was her freedom. The world around Samantha seemed to freeze as James stared at the phone in his hands, the news headline burning into her mind like a neon sign in the dark. Her knees wobbled, and she clutched the edge of the fountain for support. Chloe took a step back, glancing nervously between Samantha and James, as if caught in the middle of a battlefield. Samantha began, her voice trembling. He didn't look at her. "Is this who you really are? Lauren Cole? The fugitive they're talking about?" She bit her lip, unable to meet his piercing gaze. "It's not what it sounds like." James scoffed, his laugh cold and bitter. "Not what it sounds like. Sam or Lauren or whoever you are, you ran out on our wedding, and now I'm finding out my fiancé might be a criminal." Chloe stepped forward, placing a cautious hand on James' arm. "James, maybe we should talk about this somewhere private. The park isn't exactly the best place for this conversation." But James was already shaking his head, his emotions boiling over. "No, I want to hear it all. Right here. Right now." Samantha lowered her head, tears streaming down her face. "Yes, my real name is Lauren Cole. Yes, I made mistakes, huge mistakes. But I'm not the same person I was back then." James crossed his arms, his jaw clenched. "Start from the beginning. I want to know everything." Samantha took a deep breath, her hands trembling as she began her story. "It happened 6 years ago. I was young, reckless, and in love with the wrong person. His name was Kyle, and he dragged me into a life I wasn't ready for. Parties, drinking, stealing, it was all a rush back then. I thought I was invincible." She hesitated, her voice faltering. "One night after a party, Kyle decided to steal a car. I was stupid enough to get in with him. We didn't even make it 2 miles before we crashed into another car. A family was inside, a mom and her son. They were seriously hurt." James' face darkened, but he stayed silent, letting her continue. "I wasn't driving, but I didn't stop Kyle when he fled. I ran too. And when the police came looking for us, I lied. I said I didn't know anything about the crash. But they didn't believe me. Kyle and I were both charged." Chloe's eyes widened. "But you weren't convicted, were you?" Samantha shook her head. "Kyle took the blame for most of it, but I was still facing charges for obstruction of justice and being an accessory. My lawyer cut a deal, but I couldn't handle the shame. I left town before my sentencing. I changed my name, moved here, and tried to start over. I've been running ever since." James exhaled sharply, his shoulders sagging. "So that's it? You've been lying to me this whole time? Every moment we shared was built on a lie." "No!" Samantha cried, reaching for his hand, but he pulled away. "I swear, James, I love you. Everything I've felt for you is real. I never wanted you to get hurt by my past." James looked at her, his face a mask of pain and disbelief. "Hurt? You've done more than hurt me, Sam. You've destroyed everything. How am I supposed to believe anything you say now?" Chloe stepped between them, her voice firm. "All right, that's enough. James, I get that you're angry, but yelling isn't going to help anyone. Samantha Lauren, whatever her name is, she's been through enough." James' jaw tightened, but he didn't argue. He turned away, his hands on his hips as he tried to collect himself. Before anyone could say another word, the sound of a car screeching to a halt nearby drew their attention. A black sedan pulled up to the curb, and two men in suits stepped out. They looked official, too official. "Lauren Cole," one of them called, his eyes locking onto Samantha. Her heart stopped. They had found her. "Miss Cole, we need you to come with us," the man said, pulling out a badge. "You're under investigation for your involvement in a hit-and-run run 6 years ago. Please come quietly." Samantha froze, panic gripping her. Chloe instinctively stepped in front of her as if to shield her from the agents. "Wait a minute," Chloe said, her voice shaking. "She hasn't done anything wrong. She's trying to fix her life." The agent ignored her, stepping closer. "Miss Cole, don't make this harder than it needs to be." James stood to the side, his face a storm of emotions. He didn't move to help her, nor did he speak up. Samantha's legs felt like jelly as she slowly raised her hands. "I'll go," she whispered, her voice hollow. As the agents approached, Chloe grabbed Samantha's arm. "No, we're not doing this." "Run!" "What?" Samantha gasped, but Chloe was already pulling her away. "Run!" Chloe repeated, her voice urgent. Samantha's survival instincts kicked in, and she broke into a sprint, Chloe right beside her. The agents shouted after them, but Samantha didn't dare look back. "Stop them!" one of the agents yelled, but they were already disappearing into the maze of streets. James stood frozen, watching as the woman he thought he knew vanished into the chaos. The sounds of pounding footsteps and shouts echoed through the narrow alleyways as Samantha and Chloe darted around corners, their breaths ragged and hearts racing. Samantha's once pristine wedding dress was now a tattered mess, the hem snagging on rough bricks and grime as they ran. "We can't keep this up," Samantha gasped, glancing over her shoulder. The two agents were hot on their heels, their stern faces determined. Chloe tugged her forward. "Don't stop now. There's a market up ahead. We can lose them in the crowd." Samantha didn't have time to argue. She focused on putting one foot in front of the other, her lungs burning with every breath. The alley opened up into a bustling street market where vendors shouted to attract customers, and the smell of roasted food mixed with the chaos of midday chatter. "Stick close to me," Chloe urged. Waving through the throng of people. Samantha followed, her heart hammering as she shoved past startled shoppers. She could feel the agents closing in, their deep voices calling out commands to each other. "There! She's heading into the market." Panic surged through Samantha as she spotted a side street to the right. "Chloe, this way!" They ducked into the narrow street, slipping behind a stack of wooden crates. Samantha crouched low, her chest heaving as she tried to catch her breath. Chloe peeked out cautiously, her face pale but focused. "I think we lost them," Chloe whispered, though her tone was far from confident. Samantha pressed her back against the wall, tears stinging her eyes. "This is all my fault. You shouldn't even be here, Chloe. I've dragged you into my mess." Chloe turned to her, placing a firm hand on her shoulder. "Don't do that. I chose to help you. And besides, you're my friend. I'm not going to let you face this alone." Samantha sniffled, her guilt threatening to overwhelm her. "But I don't even know where to go. I've been running for so long, maybe it's time I stop." "No," Chloe said firmly. "You don't get to give up now. We're going to figure this out. Together." Their moment of quiet was shattered by the sound of footsteps nearby. Samantha's blood ran cold as she heard one of the agents' voices. They couldn't have gotten far. "Check every side street." Chloe's eyes widened. "We have to move, now." Samantha nodded, and the two of them slipped further down the alley, keeping to the shadows. They emerged onto another busy street, blending into the crowd as best they could. Samantha kept her head low, her veil draped over her face to avoid being recognized. "I know someone who might be able to help," Chloe said as they walked quickly. "A friend of mine runs a hostel across town. She won't ask questions, and we can lay low there for a bit." "Are you sure it's safe?" Samantha asked, her voice sparse. "Hacky. It's safer than staying here," Chloe replied. Meanwhile, back at the park, James stood frozen in disbelief. He watched the agents scramble into their car and take off after Samantha and Chloe. His mind raced with conflicting emotions: anger, betrayal, sadness, and a sliver of concern for the woman he thought he knew. "She ran again," he muttered under his breath. But as he replayed Samantha's confession in his mind, he felt a pang of doubt. Yes, she had lied to him, but she had also been honest about her guilt and her regret. She had left the altar not because she didn't love him, but because she couldn't live with her secrets anymore. "Are you just going to stand there?" a voice behind him said. James turned to see his brother, Ethan, who had witnessed the entire spectacle. "She's running from the law," Ethan continued. "You're better off letting this go." James clenched his fists. "You don't understand. She's not a bad person, Ethan. She made mistakes, but she's not who she used to be." "And how do you know that?" Ethan asked, raising an eyebrow. James hesitated. "Because I know her heart. She wouldn't have told me the truth if she didn't care." Ethan sighed. "Well, it's your call, but don't let your feelings blind you to reality. She's in serious trouble, and if you get involved, you could be too." James looked down the street where the agents had disappeared. He felt a knot tighten in his chest. Was he willing to risk everything to help her? Across town, Samantha and Chloe finally reached the small hostel Chloe had mentioned. It was a run-down building with peeling paint and a flickering neon sign. Inside, the air was thick with the scent of old wood and mildew, but it offered the anonymity they desperately needed. Chloe's friend, a wiry woman named Karen, greeted them with a knowing look. "You look like you've had a rough day," she said, her voice laced with sarcasm. "You have no idea," Chloe replied. "We need a room, just for the night." Karen asked an eyebrow, but didn't press for details. "Room 12, end of the hall. Keep a low profile." They thanked her and hurried upstairs, locking the door behind them. Samantha collapsed onto the creaky bed, her exhaustion finally catching up to her. "We can't stay here forever," she murmured. "I know," Chloe said, sitting by the window to keep watch. "But at least we have a little time to figure out our next move." Just as the words left her mouth, a car pulled up outside the hostel. Samantha peeked through the curtain and felt her heart sink. It wasn't the agents, it was Kyle. Samantha froze as she peered through the tattered curtain, her breath catching in her throat. The figure stepping out of the car was unmistakable, Kyle. His broad shoulders and cocky swagger were just as she remembered, but there was something colder in his eyes now, something that sent a chill down her spine. "What is it?" Chloe whispered, noticing Samantha's pale face. "It's Kyle," Samantha muttered, her voice barely audible. Chloe's eyes widened. "The same Kyle? The one who—" "Yes," Samantha interrupted, panic rising. "Hez here. He must have found out him back in the picture somehow." Chloe crept to the window, her face hardening as she spotted Kyle scanning the building. "Do you think he's working with the agents?" Samantha shook her head. "No. Kyle doesn't work with anyone unless there's something in it for him. If he's here, it's because he wants something from me." Chloe clenched her fists. "What do we do?" Kyle entered the hostel, his heavy boots echoing down the hallway. Samantha and Chloe heard him speaking to Karen downstairs, his smooth-talking charm in full effect. "Looking for an old friend," Kyle said casually. "She's about yay high, blonde, probably looking like she just crawled out of a dumpster." "Seen her?" Karen's skeptical voice followed. "This ain't a reunion spot, pal. You got a name or something?" Kyle chuckled. Let's just say she owes me a favor. You wouldn't want to keep me waiting, would you? Samantha's hands trembled as she backed away from the door. He'll find us, she whispered. Chloe grabbed her by the shoulders. No, he won't. We have a head start. Let's get out of here before he comes up. But before they could move, heavy footsteps pounded on the staircase. Room 12, Kyle barked. Samantha's heart sank. He knows where we are. Chloe grabbed the room's only chair and wedged it under the doorknob. Well, buy some time. Is there a fire escape? Samantha nodded, pointing to the small window on the far side of the room. It's narrow, but we can fit. Kyle's fist pounded on the door. Lauren, open up, sweetheart. We've got a lot to talk about. Samantha scrambled to the window, pushing it open with trembling hands. Chloe climbed through first, her movements quick and deliberate. Samantha followed, wincing as her foot slipped on the metal ladder. Careful, Chloe hissed, steadying her from below. Kyle's pounding grew louder, and then there was a loud crash as the door gave way. Lauren, Kyle growled, stepping into the empty room. He spotted the open window and smirked. Running again? You haven't changed a bit. Samantha and Chloe descended the fire escape as quickly as they could, the cold metal biting into their hands. When they reached the ground, they bolted into the alleyway, their adrenaline fueling every step. Keep going, Chloe urged, glancing over her shoulder. But Kyle was already on their trail, leaping down the fire escape with shocking speed. They reached a dead-end brick wall too high to climb and no way around. Samantha's chest tightened as Kyle's footsteps echoed closer. We're trapped, she whispered, backing against the wall. Chloe stepped in front of her, defiant. Not if I can help it. Kyle appeared at the mouth of the alley, his expression smug. Well, well, isn't this cozy? You've got yourself a bodyguard now, Lauren. What do you want, Kyle? Samantha demanded, her voice shaking. He held up his hands in mock innocence. Relax, sweetheart. I'm just here to talk. You owe me, remember? And I'm here to collect. I don't owe you anything, Samantha snapped. Kyle's smile faded, replaced by a dangerous glare. That's where you're wrong. I kept my mouth shut about you when everything went south. I could have dragged you down with me, but I didn't. You think that was free? Chloe stepped forward, her fists clenched. She doesn't owe you a thing. Now leave her alone before I call the cops. Kyle laughed, a dark, menacing sound. Oh, that's cute. You think I'm scared of the cops? Let me clue you in, sweetheart. They've got bigger problems than me. Kyle turned his attention back to Samantha, his tone turning icy. Here's the deal. I need cash, and you're going to help me get it. I know you've been laying low, but I also know you've got connections now. You're going to pull some strings and make me a very happy man. Samantha's stomach churned. I don't have any connections. I've been trying to rebuild my life. Kyle's eyes narrowed. Then figure it out. Because if you don't, I'll make sure every cop in this city knows exactly where to find you. And trust me, it'll make it sound a whole lot worse than it really was. Chloe stepped closer, her voice steady despite the fear in her eyes. You're pathetic. Blackmailing her after everything you've already done? You don't scare us. Kyle smirked. Keep talking, tough girl. We'll see how brave you are when you're the one running for your life. Before Kyle could say more, the wail of sirens echoed in the distance. His expression shifted from smug to cautious. Looks like your little escape has drawn some attention, he muttered, backing toward the alley's exit. Don't think this is over, Lauren. I'll be watching. He disappeared into the shadows just as the flashing lights of police cars lit up the street. Now what? Chloe asked, her voice tense. Samantha clenched her fists, a mix of fear and determination flooding her. We run. But this time, I'm not running to hide. I'm running to end this. Samantha and Chloe sprinted down the alley as the police sirens drew nearer. Samantha's mind raced, her fear now laced with a fiery determination. She was tired of running, tired of being hunted by both her past and the law. But the immediate problem was the flashing blue lights. "We can't let them catch us," Chloe yelled, pulling Samantha toward a narrow opening between two buildings. Samantha hesitated. "Maybe we should stop. If I explain everything, explain what? That you're a fugitive, and we've been dodging federal agents all day." "You think they'll just let us go?" Chloe snapped, dragging her along. Samantha bit her lip, guilt gnawing at her. But Chloe was right. The cops wouldn't care about her side of the story. They ducked through the gap, emerging onto a quieter street. Samantha's heart sank as she spotted another squad car coming from the opposite direction. "We're boxed in," she cried. Chloe scanned their surroundings, her sharp eyes landing on a man unloading crates from a delivery van. "Over there." "What?" Chloe didn't answer. She sprinted to the van, yanking the rear door open. "Get in." Samantha's stomach churned as she climbed inside, the faint smell of old fruit filling her nostrils. Chloe followed and slammed the door shut, just as the van started moving. The delivery man didn't seem to notice the extra passengers, focused on navigating through the chaotic streets. Samantha pressed her ear to the side panel, listening as the police cars zoomed past. "Do you think they saw us?" she whispered. Chloe leaned against the crates, exhaling in relief. "No, at least not yet. But we need a plan, Sam. A real plan. Running isn't going to cut it anymore." Samantha nodded, her jaw tightening. "I know. I've been thinking if I can find proof that Kyle Less hit me up all those years ago, maybe I can clear my name." Chloe frowned. "And how do you plan to do that?" "I don't know yet. But Kyle's the key to everything. If I can get close to him, I can—" "Whoa, whoa, whoa," Chloe interrupted. "You're talking about confronting the guy who just threatened you in an alley. That's suicide." "I don't have a choice," Samantha said, her voice firm. "I can't keep running forever. I need to face this head on." The van came to a stop, and the two women held their breath as the driver opened the back doors. "What the—" The delivery man froze, his eyes wide with shock. "Please, don't call the cops," Samantha blurted out, her hands raised in surrender. The man's brow furrowed. "What are you two doing in my van?" "We're in trouble," Chloe admitted. "We just need a place to lay low for a few hours." The man hesitated, his gaze shifting between them. Then, to their surprise, he sighed and gestured for them to climb out. "Fine. But you owe me an explanation," he said gruffly. Samantha and Chloe exchanged a look before stepping onto the pavement. The man led them into a small storage room attached to a bakery. "Name's Paul," he said. "And I'm not a fan of the police, so you're lucky I'm feeling generous today." Samantha offered a faint smile. "Thank you, Paul. We won't forget this." Paul waved her off. Yeah, just don't make me regret it." While Samantha and Chloe regrouped, Kyle was already putting his next plan into motion. Seated in a dimly lit bar, he made a call to one of his old contacts, a man known for digging up dirt on just about anyone. "I need everything you can find on Lauren Taylor," Kyle said, nursing a glass of whiskey. The contact chuckled. "You're still chasing that one? Thought you'd moved on." "She's got something I need," Kyle replied, his tone cold. "And I'm not letting her slip away again." As he hung up, a shadow fell across the table. Kyle looked up to see one of the federal agents standing over him. "We know you've been in contact with Samantha Taylor," the agent said, his voice low. Kyle smirked. "So what if I have?" The agent leaned closer. "Help us bring her in and, well, make it worth your while. But if you get in our way, you'll regret it." Kyle's smirk widened. "He'll keep that in mind." Back at the bakery, Samantha paced the small room, her mind racing. Paul, do you have a computer I could use? Paul raised an eyebrow. Why? I need to dig into Kyle's records. He's been blackmailing me for years, but there has to be something I can use against him, Samantha explained. Paul sighed but nodded, leading her to an old desktop in the corner. Knock yourself out, but don't get me tangled up in whatever mess you're in. Samantha sat down and began typing furiously, her hands trembling with a mix of fear and determination. Chloe stood behind her, keeping watch. What exactly are you looking for? Chloe asked. Anything that proves Kyle's been involved in illegal activities, Samantha replied. If I can expose him, the agents might focus on him instead of me. As she scrolled through public records and news articles, Samantha's eyes lit up. There. What is it? Chloe leaned in. Kyle's been linked to a series of fraudulent business deals, Samantha said, pointing to the screen. If I can get concrete evidence, I might be able to bargain with the agents. Their moment of triumph was cut short by the sound of a car pulling up outside. Paul peeked through the window, his face tightening. You've got company, he said. Samantha's stomach dropped as she recognized the vehicle. It was the same car Kyle had been driving earlier. He's here, she whispered. Chloe grabbed her arm. We need to leave. Now. But before they could move, the bakery door burst open, and Kyle stepped inside, his eyes gleaming with malice. Going somewhere? He drawled. Samantha felt a wave of dread wash over her. This time there was no escape. Kyle's smirk widened as he stepped further into the room, his presence suffocating. Samantha and Chloe instinctively backed away, their paths blocked by the desk and wall behind them. Paul watched from the corner, frozen in uncertainty, clearly regretting his decision to help. Fancy seeing you here, Lauren, Kyle sneered, leaning casually against the doorframe. And I see you've made some new friends. How cozy. What do you want, Kyle? Samantha demanded, her voice trembling but defiant. What I've always wanted, Kyle replied, his tone turning serious. You. Helping me fix the mess you made when you decided to play the hero all those years ago. I'm done waiting. Samantha's fists clenched. I'm not helping you. Not anymore. Kyle's expression darkened, the humor draining from his face. You really want to do this the hard way? Chloe stepped forward, standing between Kyle and Samantha. Touch her, and I swear Kyle cut her off with a cold laugh. You're adorable, you know that? But this isn't your fight. So why don't you step aside before you get hurt? Chloe didn't budge, her glare unrelenting. Samantha's mind raced, searching for a way out. Then she spotted it, the flash drive sitting next to the computer. Keep him talking, she whispered to Chloe, barely moving her lips. Chloe caught the hint and crossed her arms. You think you're so tough, don't you? But let me tell you something. You're nothing without your threats. The moment someone stands up to you, you crumble. Kyle's eyes narrowed. You've got guts. I'll give you that. But guts won't save you when you're in over your head. While Kyle's focus was on Chloe, Samantha slid the flash drive into the computer and began copying the files she had found earlier. Her hands trembled as the progress bar slowly filled. Almost there, she thought, her heart pounding. Kyle noticed Samantha's movement and lunged toward her, shoving Chloe aside. What are you doing? Samantha grabbed the flash drive and backed away, clutching it tightly. I'm making sure everyone knows who you really are. Kyle froze for a moment, then laughed. You think that's going to stop me? Go ahead, send it. You think those files can hurt me? They can, Samantha shot back, her voice steady. They'll ruin you, Kyle. And this time I'm not afraid to fight. Paul, who had been silent until now, suddenly stepped forward, holding a heavy wrench. You've got about 5 seconds to get out of my bakery before I take care of this myself, he growled. Kyle glanced at Paul, then back at Samantha. For the first time, a flicker of doubt crossed his face. Fine, Kyle said, raising his hands in mock surrender. "You win this round." But as he stepped toward the door, he grabbed a rolling pin from the counter and hurled it at Samantha. She ducked, and Kyle used the distraction to grab the flash drive from her hand. "You're not as clever as you think," he sneered, bolting out the door. "Stop him!" Chloe yelled, chasing after him. Samantha and Paul followed, bursting onto the street just as Kyle climbed into his car. Samantha's desperation boiled over. She spotted a nearby bike and jumped onto it without thinking. "Get in the van!" Chloe shouted to Paul before sprinting after Samantha. Kyle's car roared to life, screeching down the street. Samantha pedaled furiously, her determination outweighing her fear. Chloe caught up and leapt onto the back of the bike, holding on tightly. "We can't let him get away," Samantha yelled, her legs burning with effort. Kyle sped through the streets, his eyes darting between the road and his rearview mirror. He didn't notice the unmarked car tailing him until it was too late. Blue and red lights flashed as federal agents surrounded him at the next intersection. Kyle slammed O on the brakes, cursing under his breath. Samantha and Chloe skidded to a stop a block away, watching as the agents approached Kyle's car with their guns drawn. "They caught him," Chloe whispered, her voice a mix of relief and disbelief. Samantha nodded, her chest heaving. "But it's not over yet." Back at the bakery, Samantha plugged the flash drive into the computer again. She emailed the files to the agents, attaching a note explaining everything Kyle had done. "This has to work," she said, her voice trembling. Chloe placed a hand on her shoulder. "It will. You've done everything you can." A week later, Samantha received a call from the federal agents. They had arrested Kyle on multiple charges, including fraud and obstruction of justice. With his testimony, they were able to clear Samantha's name. For the first time in years, Samantha felt a weight lift off her shoulders. "You did it," Chloe said, smiling. "No," Samantha replied. "We did it.